Tonight, we're very lucky to have Tami Liddell, campus minister and advisor to Appalachia Volunteers, speaking tonight. I want to say a few things before we begin. First, that feel free to help yourself to food throughout tonight's presentation. And in particular, I want to remind everyone what this is all about. Agape Latte was begun to foster conversation among you, not just to have a nice speaker and a good talk to attend, but to get us all thinking and talking. In particular, we always have time for questions and answers, so please be thinking and have some questions. And also keep talking and thinking after tonight about what Tami talks about. Two things I want to announce program-wise, opportunities coming up. There are going to be two retreats. One is, well, three things I'm going to say. One is the Manresa retreat, which happens over winter break. It's the last week of winter break. It's a 5-day retreat at Dover. You can sign up online at Campus Ministries website for that. And also, Urban Immersion is a service experience in Boston happening at the same time. You can also sign up for that online. I encourage you to check both of those out. Also, Salt and Light is having a fall retreat next weekend, the November 12th to the 14th. Also online. I encourage you to check that out. Please make sure your cell phones are off. And I'm going to give it over to Meg. Thank you all for being here.
Hi everyone, welcome to Agape Latte tonight. I'm here to introduce Tami. Tami Liddell has been at Boston College since 2000. She works closely with the Appalachia Volunteers, Loyola Volunteers, and helps with retreats, liturgies, and other programs in campus ministry here. Tami has worked in campus ministry and higher education for 15 years and has a Master of Divinity from the University of Notre Dame. Additionally, Tami has worked in large communities for people with developmental disabilities in Massachusetts, as well as in Ireland. She currently lives in Natick with her husband and 2 children. So please, everyone, help me in joining, giving a warm welcome to Tami Liddell. Thank you.
So I'll put the watch up there so that I don't talk on and on. I want to just start by saying thank you so much to Rick, to Paul, to Karen, to the whole Agape Latte team. What you might not know is how much work goes on behind the scenes to make sure that this happens. They think a lot about the topics, the speakers. They give the speakers, namely me, lots of help, and they do all the advertising. So I just want to I think that Rick and all of his team deserves a round of applause here because they've done a great job. So, and I also want to thank Campus Ministry and C21 for having me here, but mostly I want to thank all of you for coming and listening. It's a little bit daunting for me to think that something about my story tonight might intersect with your story, but as the Appalachia Volunteers know, I'm not a bit intimidated to stand up in front of 600 volunteers and lay down the law before they leave on their trips. But this is a little daunting for me, and I just really believe that kind of between speaking and listening tonight that maybe both of us can learn something, and that's when the Holy Spirit is most present, when we're open to that. And I believe that that's something that's present here tonight. And that also we're all meant to be here for some purpose. And I hope that that's true for all of you, that you can get in touch with that purpose tonight. I'm very interruptible, so even though I have this kind of speech and I have a PowerPoint and I'll try to keep that all together for you, you can interrupt at any time if something I say sparks a question or a comment. If you would please just raise your hand and we'll take it from there, because I think that that's the way that I'm most comfortable. Father Gregory Norbit is a composer of really beautiful spiritual music. Some of it you've heard. And he says there is an energy in us which makes things happen when the paths of other persons touch ours. And we have to be there, and we have to let it happen. And so being there and letting it happen, I think, is a good place to start when I talk about Appa Love. That's the title of this, is Appa Love, Life's Calling. And I feel like I'm taking a little bit of a risk here to tell you that I fell in love with the Appalachia region about 25 years ago on an alternative spring break at my Jesuit college. And I don't blame you for thinking, wait, didn't they say that Tami's worked in service with college students in higher education for 15 years? And I give you permission to think, wow, she kind of needs to grow up and get a life, doesn't she? And if that's your thought, then that's a criticism that I will note and take into account for my future plans. But let's just get some things out there about Apple love. So when people hear the word Appalachia here at BC, it can conjure up many appellations, some images, some stories, some of them not flattering to our volunteers, some of them not flattering to our local communities, some of them not flattering to BC. I can think of a few of them, and if you want to put up Megan's going to give me a hand here. I can think of a few of the appellations that people will give to Apple Love. And I think some of you can too. So if anyone has heard anything about the Appalachia Volunteers that just conjures up a word or an image, why don't you raise your hand, or don't raise your hand and just shout it out? Anyone? No? Has anyone here been on an Appalachia trip? Okay. Perhaps it could be a positive thing, it could be a negative thing. Nothing. Okay, so I have a few. Service, very good. That's excellent. That's a good one. Anything else? Yeah.
Appalachianship.
Ah, interesting. Appalachianship. Did everybody hear that? I'll touch on that later. Friendship. I like that. Anything else? Drunkalatia. Thank you. There's an appellation we've gotten a lot of. Anything else? So some phrases that come to mind when people talk about Appalachia could be, I've heard them, I've read them in the Heights many times. People have come to my office to tell me how they feel about Appalachia, both good and bad. Appalachia volunteers are well-meaning people who just want to stroke their own egos by helping people. That could be one. Appalachia volunteers abandon their friends when they return and become obsessed by their groups. These are from the former friends of Appalachia volunteers. Many Appalachia volunteers return and change their majors. I get to hear this a lot, actually, from the people who've changed their majors. Appalachia volunteers think they're better than people who go on to the beach for spring break. Appalachia volunteers looks good on a resume. Appalachia volunteers is a good way to make new friends at BC. Appalachia is a way to make new friends and drink with them at BC. So all of those preconceptions and, accurate or not accurate, we've got them out here on the table. I don't promise to address all of them specifically, but if you have questions about any of them, I can certainly talk about that. Because what I know about the program is that each person's experience varies widely, that just as all of the individuals in this room could go on even the same trip, that your experiences would be really different and unique. And that's really what I know about the Appalachia Volunteers, is that when it comes down to the individuals, to your stories, they are very unique. And that's why I think it's so important to share them with each other when we come back. So I've been with the Appalachia Volunteers at BC for 8 years, and I've worked with similar programs at 2 other schools because of some really amazing student leadership, the help of colleagues in campus ministry, friends on campus, and really generous donors who give us money. This behemoth gets off the ground every year without too much drama, believe it or not. And what we have here is this really nice mission statement, and you can read the mission statement. And it's beautiful and it's aspirational, and we do try to educate people about this mission statement throughout the year, but behind the scenes there's just a lot of what we've put at the top there, the apparatus, the stuff that makes Appalachia really work. And some people told me they were a little bit curious about how all that happens with such a minimal amount of drama. So first of all, it's true, there's no application process. That's something that sometimes first-year students come and they're really worried about, but there's no application process. The requirements are Sunday night meetings, days of service in Boston, dues, fundraising, forms, adherence to our mission and our principle, and that's pretty much it. We cast a really wide net on campus. In any given year between the summer program and the spring program, we might have 10% of the entire student body participating in the Appalachia Volunteers, coming through our doors, going on a domestic service trip. And the numbers are impressive. They're a little daunting when I look at them, when I see, sort of how the numbers shake down. So between our 2 campus ministers, if everyone wants to look over at the man in the green shirt, Dan Leahy, he also works with Appalachia Volunteers. Give us a wave there, Dan. There he is. So the 2 campus ministers, sometimes we have 5 flights, we have 10 buses, we have 12 council members. I think they're all probably here tonight, so we're really preaching to the choir. We have 36 local communities this year. We have 72 trip leaders. We have 85 7-passenger vans. We have 105 drivers, and we have 595 volunteers. So all of those logistics in some way through spreadsheets and through, as Sam and Bailey know, maps on the wall and little pins and everything, all of these folks, all of those 595 volunteers get connected with 72 trip leaders, 36 local communities, 85 vans, 10 buses, blah, blah. You can do the math doesn't all work out there. Someone asked me if I had to add all that up, but it's complicated, and it's a little bit daunting. So it's also very exciting. And the structure of the program, it's a little bit more hierarchical in terms of the leadership, but how we view the program and how we look at what we do, this is something that I think sort of mirrors our vision, at least. If you could imagine that those separations between the lines, those intersections, are much more fluid, that conversation flows in and out between all of those different areas, where the communities are the core of our program. The communities that we go to are the heart of our program. And they invite us, they welcome us, they feed us, they teach us, and then they send us home. The amazing trip leaders are, they're kind of in between the communities and the volunteers. They're a nexus, really. And they're out there on their own. For people who don't know, the leaders don't have faculty or staff advisors that go with them. Dan and I don't go on Appalachia trips. And they're there by themselves. So their preparations and their contacts with the local communities and all of the responsibilities that they have for the trips are really important. But they're also really important because what we know is that as great as we have preparation for our volunteers for the Sunday night meetings, that nothing really gets communicated to them that isn't communicated by the actions of the trip leaders on the trips themselves. How many people here have been a trip leader or are a trip leader? Anybody? Yeah, you can raise your hands if you have been. So this is really, they're not the heart of the program, but they're really an intersection point between the volunteers and the communities. And then we have Boston College, and we're hoping that in the fluidity of the conversations between all these different layers, that the Boston College community is informed and impacted by everything that's going on at every other level. So a little bit about Appalachia. This goes under the sort of rubric of, what are we all about? How do we get it done? The Appalachia Volunteers is, of course, a misnomer. First of all, we don't just go to the Appalachia region, but I wanted to at least touch on where the Appalachia region is. And it was defined in 1965 by the Appalachia Regional Commission. And it currently includes 420 counties, 8 independent cities in 13 states. So you can see it's not just kind of one area that you might think of as the mountains. After the commission was established, counties were added based on economic need and not on cultural parameters, which is an interesting part of our program because we think of it as kind of a unified whole with very cohesive cultural traditions and things like that. And it's really not. It was based on economic need, not on cultural cohesion. So within that region, we also go to the eastern shore of Virginia, which you can see over there to the right. We go to South Carolina, North Carolina. So we go outside the boundaries of Appalachia. We also have been in the Gulf Coast for the last 5 years since Hurricane Katrina. And we also go north this year. Aren't we going north this year? We're going north this year, yeah, to Maine. So here's a bunch of sites that we're going to. And I think that Google would only let me go A to Z on this one, so that's not all the sites. But it's a good kind of smattering of sites. Bailey and Sam can correct me on some of those, but there's a few of them up there. Total, there's 36 this year. Some of those sites in those towns and counties, and some of those letters are in places that don't even have a town or a county listed, but we kind of know where they are. They're part of Habitat International, and if you're not familiar with Habitat International, their mission is that through volunteer labor and donations of money and supplies and materials, they build and rehabilitate simple, decent housing for alongside the homeowners, the partner families. And it's not a giveaway program. In addition to a down payment and monthly mortgages, homeowners invest hundreds of hours of their own labor in what's called sweat equity. And that money goes back into the money that they pay for mortgages, goes back into other Habitat homes. So a lot of our volunteers will be working with Habitat. Some sites are part of Volunteers for Communities out of Roanoke, Virginia, which is on there somewhere. And that's the Southeastern Rural Community Assistance Project. And it's an overarching program that seeks to bring sort of water resources to different areas that are in need, but they also branch out to help to help improve the quality of life for all low-income residents. And they're not just in the Appalachia region; they go all the way to Florida. In fact, the Southeastern Rural Communities Assistance Project. And we've also, in the past, been activated to respond to crises like Hurricane Katrina. Within 4 months of Hurricane Katrina, we had over 100 volunteers in Pascagoula and Biloxi, Mississippi, and we've been back every year. Unfortunately for us, and fortunately maybe for some of you, Mardi Gras falls within our spring break this year. So how many people are going to Mardi Gras? Anybody here? You can admit it. I saw a little hand over there. So because of Mardi Gras, none of our service sites are actually asking for us to come this year. So we'll be back again next year. Another part of the program that's very cumbersome. Oh, here's some pictures from some of our work sites. I think the next one, too, is one. Is there another one there? Okay. Yep, these are some of the sites that I was talking about that are Habitat or Volunteers for Communities. I think Rick Rossi went to Ivanhoe when he was an undergraduate, didn't you? Yeah, that was in 2007. And then if you just want, so the next component of the program is the Day of Service. And I think it's in the next couple. There's more in Georgia. This is after the hurricane in Mississippi. Yep. Okay, so this is last month's Day of Service. We try to get all 600 volunteers out there to do a Day of Service in Boston. It's part of our mission statement, and it's intended to tie our work to this community that we call home, to Alston, Brighton, to Boston. We believe that need is in everybody's backyard, and it's our responsibility to try to meet that need. The next component of the program are our Sunday night meetings, and if you can see there, that's Paul Chiozzi. He's actually sitting back over there. He's a graduate assistant now for first-year experience, but when he was an undergrad, he used to stand up in front of the Sunday night meetings. And they're the place where a lot of preparation happens. We have speakers from the BC community, the local Boston community, as well as guests from communities that we visit. And money is a really big part of our program. We're funded solely through the generosity of individuals and groups, the dues that our members pay, raffle ticket sales, point drive funds, SOFC funds. And one of the most striking experiences I've had in the last few years is, so we open these, we get a few thousand donations, some of them ranging from $5 to $5,000. And we're grateful for the $5, we're grateful for the $5,000. But what surprises me every year, and I'm gratified every year, is that when you open those letters, some of those thousands of letters, there'll be a thank you note inside, and it'll be from somebody's grandma saying, thank you so much for giving Lindsay this opportunity. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share this money with you. So I just don't know in how many other situations in my life that when someone is giving me money, they're thanking me for the opportunity to do it. So I do think our donors are very special and unique, and I think that that our students really know that, and they're really good stewards with the money that comes in. And then another part of the program, this is our send-off Mass, but as a Catholic Christian, with our Catholic Christian heritage here at BC, we really feel that it's our responsibility to really communicate that faith and action work together to make the reign of God, present in all of creation. And we invite and expect our volunteers to consider their own faith perspective on the work that they're doing and the relationships that they're forming, and we try to give them a foundation in the social teachings of the church so they can bring these to bear on the issues that they come up against in the communities where we go. And then the last part that's kind of fun, we don't want to do automatic updates. The last part that's kind of fun is when the buses leave, and there's all this buzz out here. It's actually over there, outside of Robsham. And that's when, from the early days when there were, the 95 vans were taking off and leaving. There were campus school vans, and they were all different kinds of vans leaving from Boston. And you can see them down there in the corner, to Greyhound buses and other vans there. That's a really exciting time, and that's when it sort of all comes together, and we've never left anybody behind. We've left a lot of people behind over the years in the infirmary with mono, but if they want to come and they show up, we get them on there. But yeah, some years people get left behind, but not because they chose to. There's a couple more slides of that. This is everyone in lower dining hall. I think those picture all the luggage, and then they get on the buses, and then we send them off. And we wave goodbye to him down there in the corner. Okay, so my own journey to service. So that's everybody's journey to service. This is everything that happens before. Was that interesting to anybody? Anybody have any questions about it? Did I mention our $300,000 budget? Yeah, people like that number. But my own journey to service was not that well organized. It wasn't that even intentional, and it didn't have that many requirements. So in 1985, I was feeling a little bit trapped by the cold weather of my Midwestern Jesuit university, and I suspected that I had sort of exhausted what the kind of social life that was expected of a college student. So I grew up the fifth of 6 children in California, and everyone in my family was expected to go to college, especially the women in my family, and that was because both of my grandmothers had been left with with families to tend, and so it was really, the girls really had to go to college, but I was the first one to go away to a 4-year college, kind of a traditional residential college. So in fact, my expectations of what my social life would look like in college weren't even really that clear, but what I didn't expect to feel was really lonely, really out of place, and I just kind of wasn't fitting in with the people I was supposed to fit in with. I didn't feel like some of the people who were around me. I didn't feel like I had a lot in common. So it was the spring, the quote spring. I was in Omaha, Nebraska. Anybody from Omaha, Nebraska, or anywhere near Omaha? So spring. It's not really spring. It's pretty darn cold. And I walked over to the campus ministry office to turn in my application for the spring break service trips. And I was met there by a senior, and her name was Sandy Schaefer. And Sandy is in that picture there with the little coat on in the back. And she started asking me how I liked Creighton. Did I like my classes? Was I making friends? Was I happy there? And by the end of the conversation, she invited me to go with some of her friends to a farm that belonged to one of our philosophy professors, Father Datko. And I was a very shy person, and I very kind of unexpectedly said yes to this invitation, because it's not the kind of thing. I'm a huge introvert, off the scale, and that's just not something that I would normally do. But I did it, and I found myself at this farm in front of a wood-burning stove, shelling the corn off the cob to pop, which I had never done before. And we were popping corn and really just talking about life and love and philosophy and all kinds of things. And between that and a trip to Zuni, New Mexico, which is a picture over there, with some of the same folks, I can tell you that my college experience and even my life took a really different turn than I had expected it to. And as different as that all looked, so this is way back in the 80s with our bad hair and whatever, as different as it looked 25 years ago or 30 years ago when my colleague Dan Leahy went on his first Appalachia trip here from BC, I do believe that promise of love, like here we call it Appa love, but I think there was a promise of love that was very real back then and very similar to what our students experience today. So Appa love is a very expansive, kind of audacious and aspirational term. Because love is something we can use really superficially. We can love Lady Gaga. We can love chipotle carne asada burritos. We can love a lot of things. Is this what we mean when we say apple love? And I think about this pendant that I'm wearing, which there's a picture of it up there. My husband gave it to me years ago, and it's from Virgil's Aeneid. My husband is, by the way, really handy to have around if you have any medieval Latin or Middle High German manuscripts. That's really his first true love besides me. And this pendant in Latin on one side and English on the other says, "Love conquers all." And conquering all, and the whole quote is conquering all things, sounds like a lot of hard work and possibly big task to conquer all. And the interesting thing is that my private Latin scholar also tells me that Virgil has another line in the Aeneid, and it says, "Work conquers all." And so I extrapolate from this that love and work really do go hand in hand, and that love and work have a lot in common. And this has been my experience. Virgil goes on to say, "So let us surrender ourselves to love." And I think love like that is a vicious risk for us to take. In order to do the work of loving, in order to practice love, in order to get good at it, I think that there's some real risks that we're invited to take on. And I can think of several ways that Appa Love, as we call it, might contain that challenge to all of us. And I don't mean just getting into a bus with 52 strangers only to move on to a van with 6 other strangers, only to go to a town full of strangers. Like, all of that is, I mean, I'll give you it. It's a little bit scary. But in fact, I think that there's a scarier risk that our students are engaged in when they go on Appalachia, and that's one of communication and conversation. And I will indeed sound like an old fogey when I say that I think that conversation is really seriously in jeopardy today. Our conversation and communication is being facilitated so well by technology that face-to-face encounters, I think, become increasingly scary. I remember I used to write really long, especially when I lived in Ireland, I used to write these really long and very thoughtful letters to my friends and family, at least monthly, and to my mom, I used to write them weekly. And they knew and forgave my really bad handwriting and my really bad spelling, but now they don't need to anymore because they have, we have email, and so my little email corrects all my spelling and everyone can read it, and I'm just not sure that as much thought is going into it. And another example is that at least weekly, students beg me not to waste their time with voicemail or direct contact when I can reach them so much quicker with a, text message. Well, I'm here to tell you I don't even know how to send a text message. And the longer and the more I hear about people needing to get text messages from me, I think the harder I'm going to dig my heels in and never learn how to send a text message. But when we leave on the trips to Appalachia, the Eastern Shore, Virginia, the Gulf Coast, and all the points beyond, we literally leave behind the ability to have our conversation facilitated by technology. And I'm sure that this feels like a big risk to a lot of our students, to their parents, to their boyfriends, to their girlfriends, to their best friends that they want to text all the time, and not to mention to each other, even on the buses and the vans. But I can say that I don't think no matter how many obstacles we place between ourselves electronically, Facebook and Twitter, they're nothing in comparison to the other obstacles that we put up every day. The masks of perfection and confidence and these things that we put up to shield ourselves from really our own insecurity and our own fear. And I think in every new situation I come into, I meet those masks again, and I'm surprised by them again. So the things that these masks are preventing in my life is to really not ask that scary question of myself, that if all of these people here really could see the real me and could see and could know me without all of these masks, would they really love me? Would they find something lovable about me? And that's the question I think I'm avoiding with these obstacles I put between myself and other people. My daughter, Martha, is 6, and there's a word that she throws around a lot, which is, in her tone of voice, popular. So she'll say, I've heard her say, that I'm actually quoting, I think I'll change the names to protect the innocent, but, Amanda said such and such about Terrence because she just wants to be popular. And I think that term for her, the word that I would maybe choose for that is phony. That what she really means is the same thing that we're all doing all the time when we're not being authentic with one another, when we don't want to talk face to face. And she doesn't have the words to explain that, so her code word is popular. But I think we're all doing it all the time, even though we might not want to put it that way. Somehow I think there's something about this program, and I really do believe this, that allows us to practice, at least to practice taking off the masks for a time, kind of risking that face-to-face encounter, risking the rejection of other people. And I do believe that in spite of how superficial it sounds, that can result in love. Our leaders are really intentional about challenging and supporting their groups in this area in the risk-taking, and they invite the students to share in reflecting on both the group and the individual experiences. And I will say many of the stories that I hear from students coming back was that they found in a place of reflection that they felt like they had permission to be themselves, their real selves, for the first time since they started school here. I especially hear this a lot from first-year students. And maybe this gets translated back into other relationships in our lives, and I want to hope so, because as going back to kind of the old fogey thing, I would really hate to think that because of all of the technology that you have between each other, that you're going to be deprived of the ways that that conversation can add to your lives. I remember my second date with my husband, Bill, and he took me to this really nice restaurant that I didn't even know existed. And we were supposed to go from the restaurant to a play, To Kill a Mockingbird. And I'll say, as we were eating dinner and talking over dinner, we didn't even look at our watches until the play was half over. And by the time dinner was over, the play was long over. That's how long this conversation lasted. And so I feel like that joy of a conversation that gets totally and completely out of hand is a joy that I just want all of you to experience. And however you open yourself up to new experiences to have that, I just wish it would happen a lot more frequently on our campus. So another aspect of APA-Love that invites, I think, risk is the idea of community. And as I said before, the local communities are really at the heart of what we do. So no matter how much preparation we do on Sunday nights, within our little BC bubble here in McElroy, our students are constantly surprised by the reception they receive in the communities that invite them to be with them for a week. And I'm thinking of the words of Jane Cabarrus on the Eastern Shore of Virginia, who really takes to heart the responsibility she feels for our students. She calls us our children, and she cares for us like we were her own, literally. She takes responsibility for our education in a hands-on way that I wish and I hope that every BC professor feels. And she teaches our students about her life, the life of her family and her friends on the Eastern Shore of Virginia. And she hopes that we come back to BC with new knowledge and understanding that we're going to share with everyone. Maxine Waller is the Director of Volunteers for Communities. I talked about them. And she facilitates all the conversations that happen between the universities and the colleges that go to local communities that she works with. And she wants to make sure that our students are going to arrive safely, that they're going to be welcomed, they're always fed, and that a lot of learning happens in those local communities, that we have some good work to do, that we have some good feedback from the community, and that we get sent forth from those communities with some kind of new insight. And I also think about the Page family in Roanoke, Virginia, and some of you, I don't know if anyone here had visited the Page family. And last year, they welcomed our students back to their home not very many months after their daughter died of sickle cell anemia. And she, Mrs. Page just said that they felt so strongly about guiding our students kind of through their world and teaching our students about how difficult and inspiring the lives of people like them are, that they didn't mind that they had just gone through this loss. They wanted our students to be with them. And I also think about Susie Jones in Exmoor, Virginia, and she works every week of her life to provide affordable housing for families at Habitat. And so hundreds and thousands of other Habitat for Humanity volunteers. And what they want for us is that we have a taste of what their lives look like, even if it's just a small taste. And I believe that if our students, if we can't learn how to be community together as BC students from communities like that, then I'm not sure that we can learn it anywhere. I don't know what's going on. It's okay. I think it is my power. Is the computer doing something weird? Okay, that's fine. So community happens within our BC groups as well, and it happens for a lot of reasons. And I think some of the reasons are because we're out of our comfort zones. Sort of default coping mechanisms aren't present. Alcohol isn't allowed. So we try new things, and we try to support each other in new ways. And that's not part of our mission statement. We don't say in our mission statement that you're going to form community with other BC people. But we really value this part of the experience, and we really honor it. And we hope that it comes home with our groups to sort of build on that in our local BC community, in the residence halls and among friends and in all the different social groups that we have. We hope that it has a positive impact on what's happening back here at BC. And I do think that the work that it takes to build love in those smaller communities, that it should come back to BC, and that it can also provide some fruit in some really unexpected and happy ways. And if my pictures were up there, I could show you pictures of happily married couples who met at BC on Appalachia trips. So Megan's going to show you those in a minute. During our trips, I know that our students are trying to learn a lot about what it means to be in the here and now, what I call the here and now. I don't call it that. In fact, in my other life, I will finish a degree in counseling psychology. And one of the most inspiring theories that I've read about is Irvin Yalom's idea that within therapy, within a therapeutic relationship, that change happens when the therapist and the client are given the opportunity to share honestly on thoughts and feelings that are happening in the moment, in the present moment. And I'm not going to imply that Appalachia Volunteers offers any kind of therapy, but I believe that this experience, that it in fact isn't one of preparing us for some other experience, that essentially it's not about sort of being there to prepare for something else. It is, I think, essentially what it is. It is what it is. It's an experience that we're meant to be present to and live in the moment. And that's not easy for us these days. And to put the old fogey hat on again, sometimes it feels like when people are able to communicate so quickly kind of what's going on in their lives that we're all kind of stars of our own reality show. And something can't be what it is because it can be so quickly edited and soundtracked for public consumption. And that takes as much time as it did for the event to happen. And remember what I said at the beginning about what Father Norbert said, and he said, and we have to be there and we have to let it happen. And I actually didn't come to a very clear realization of this until I was a lot older than all of you. I was a pretty slow learner. And I went to Ireland to be a summer volunteer in a L'Arche community in Kilmaganny, Ireland, a little tiny village. And I ended up staying there for a couple of years, in fact, living and working with people who have developmental disabilities. And after years of sort of studying and working in higher education at another Catholic college that I won't name, the community that I lived in Ireland, the little village, was a real change of pace. I went from living with people for whom the spoken and the written word was essential to people for whom the spoken and the written word was impossible. I went from working at a very prestigious Catholic university to cleaning toilets and cooking dinner every night. But living with Richard, that's Richard and that's Packy there on the right. Living with Richard and Packy and John and Brosheen and Gina, I think that taught me more about this combination of love and work and how love is work and work is love. I learned more from them than I learned in all my years of higher education. And they really had the dignity and the self-assurance to allow me as a stranger into their home and into their work and into what I would consider the most intimate parts of their lives, their prayer, their bathing, their laundry, every part of their lives I was invited into. And there wasn't a lot of time in my experience there to be sort of pondering what is this preparing me for? It really was an experience that if I wanted to live it, I had to live it in the moment, and I had to be present to every moment. And that time and energy for the here and now, I feel, brought a lot of change in my heart and really opened me up to the love that already existed in my life and the love that I wanted in my life and that I wanted to be capable of giving. So most of what I've talked about so far has been to do with the before and the during of the trips. But my experience is that the risk of going is really nothing compared to the risk of coming home. And we are very upfront with our volunteers about this, so this will be a surprise for some people. But in fact, we are very excellent at organizing Sunday night meetings and databases and forums and the getting you on the buses and getting you in the vans. But the reality is we've sort of put you on a one-way journey. And there's no coming back by the same route that you took to Ivanhoe, Virginia, Aberdeen, South Carolina, Westchester County, New York. And the truth is Mama Jane and Maxine and Susie and the Page family, they all know this perfectly well, that coming to their communities is an invitation for you to change. And they hope that it does. And that there's no coming back from that journey, that destination, the same way that you came. So we make this program as safe and easy to be a part of as possible. No application, the buses, the vans, the leaders. But from that point, it really is up to you. And there's a choice that our students make during that week and during that experience. And that choice is for change. And the question that people are asking within themselves, we hope, is, am I willing to risk all of these things, of opening myself up to all of these people, because the ultimate risk is that I might change. And you've taken a lot of risks. A lot of people who've been on trips like this, even service within the Boston area, have taken some risks. Venturing kind of out of the BC bubble as far as you can, leaving your friends behind, your laptops, your cell phone, and you've risked that much. And so we just invite all of the Appalachia volunteers and anyone who's going to put themselves in the situation where they're going to risk learning about love and learning about community and learning about communication, that knowing that love can be very disorienting and can be very transforming. Apple Love's not that different. The question that people should be asking during the week is, am I willing to change? And that's the real question of the Appalachia program. And I think that's been the question from the very beginning. This is just a quote that we can keep up here because I think it's a real challenging concept. And I'd love to take some questions about what I've just said or about any comments of things that you were thinking of as I was talking. What you think of Father Norbert's quote? Yes.
What do you think keeps all these Appalachian volunteers coming back every year?
That's a good question. So the question is, what keeps the Appalachia volunteers coming back every year? And we do know that about a third of our program every year are returners. So that's a good point, is that a lot of people do come back. I think what I hope, and some people who've been back can speak to this, but what I hope is that having had an experience that has kind of disoriented you and you found yourself being reoriented, that you're open to that, to a different experience the next time. I think our hope is that when people come back to Appalachia, to the program year after year, that they're not coming back to replicate what they've done before, but that in fact they're coming back for a new experience. And Maxine Waller, the Director of Volunteers for Communities, really encourages that in people. In fact, she, with all the communities that she works with throughout the Southeast, she says to college students, you know, all of these families and all of these host communities are happy to have you there, and they want you to learn as much as you can from the experience. And then if you want to do this program again, go to a different place the next year and learn what that community has to teach you, because it's the sort of totality of all of that learning that might help you in your future life to make different kinds of decisions or to be thinking about all those communities that you visited. So I can't speak for why students go back again and again, but I know that there is some, that other people are thinking about that question. And I don't know if anyone who has been back to Appalachia more than once wants to say something about why they, anybody? You can think about it and then say it later if you want to. You can just raise your hand. It's a good question. Other questions? You want to see the Appalachianship slide? Megan wants to show you the Appalachianship slide. So those are the ones we know about. We get letters every year, actually, from couples that met on Appalachia who got married, and then they send us money. So you're all welcome to do that too. So look, aren't they? The middle couple's actually getting married in June. Other questions? Mm-hmm. Can I read it? So it says, there is an energy in us which makes things happen when the paths of other persons touch ours, and we have to be there to let it happen. Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering if, how do you prepare the volunteers for the type of acceptance they might be finding on the trip and the communities they go to? I mean, because it is kind of uncomfortable to have strangers just pop up into your town. How do you prepare them for that?
How do we prepare the local communities? Is that, or do you,
I was asking about the volunteers, but the communities also.
Okay. So our local site coordinators are responsible for sort of preparing the local communities for the influx of college students. And sometimes that takes years. For instance, this year we might be going to a community in South Carolina that we've been in conversation with for, I think, 4 years. And some people would be watching news programs and hearing about what college students do over their spring break, or hearing about problems with college students in towns nearby or in the states where they live. And some communities are a little bit leery of college students. And so some of the responsibility of the local site coordinators is to help prepare those communities that we're not coming there, we're not going to drink, we're not going to party, we're there for a different purpose. And as far as if I understood your question correctly, what some students who come back say is that they could never have been prepared for the welcome that they received. And I think some of that is cultural. Our students who come from the southern regions or from the West would say that some of the disconnect that some of our BC students feel when they go to the South especially and are recipients of the hospitality of kind of the Southern culture, that some of it's just a cultural disconnect, that they're not used to being sort of in a situation where they're that welcomed and fed even. So much food. There's so much food that people get fed. And so some people would say that that's a cultural disconnect. And so I think it's a nice surprise for our students, in fact, and I think that even if we prepared them for that, and we do, that's a nice surprise to have when they get there. Was that helpful? Okay.
Thank you, Tami. Please join me in thanking Tami. So I'm going to thank you all for being here. Please continue to think, and particularly about this great quote as well. It can apply to so many things in our lives.